dimly lit dorm room sat in an eerie silence, punctuated only by the muffled thumping of distant music and the occasional chatter of students in the hallway. Jane, the diligent scholar, was huddled over her books, drowning in the sea of textbooks, notes, and deadlines. Her best friend, Amelia, was preparing to go out for a party with her date. As Amelia donned her party attire and touched up her makeup, she glanced at Jane and sighed. "You sure you don't want to come with me, Jane? It's going to be epic," she said with a grin. Jane, her eyes buried in her notes, shook her head. "Nah, I can't. Midterms are looming, and I have to ace them. You go ahead and have fun. Just remember to keep it safe." Amelia smiled at her friend's dedication and left the room, the door clicking shut behind her, leaving Jane in the quiet darkness. The party raged on, the hours slipping away as Amelia lost herself in the revelry, completely forgetting about Jane back in the dorm room. Only when the clock struck midnight did she remember her friend and decide it was time to return. The dimly lit hallway felt like a maze as she made her way back to the room. Upon entering, the room was pitch black, the only illumination coming from the faint moonlight seeping through the curtains. She tiptoed inside, not wanting to disturb Jane. She knew her friend was studying late and didn't want to wake her. Early in the morning, Amelia woke up with a start, her mind racing with thoughts of the upcoming exams. She had promised to discuss the material with Jane. Anxious to get started, she turned towards Jane's bed and found her still buried beneath the blankets. "Jane," she whispered, "it's time to study." But there was no response. Amelia's heart began to race. She reached out, hesitantly pulling back the covers to reveal her friend's face. What she saw was a horrifying sight. As the blanket slid away, it revealed the stark horror of the scene. Jane's once pale skin had taken on a grotesque hue of deep purples and inky blues. Her eyes, wide open and devoid of life, seemed to stare into an abyss, reflecting Amelia's own growing terror. The room felt cold and a putrid smell lingered in the air. Amelia screamed and stumbled back, falling onto the floor in a state of shock. Scanning the room in terror, Amelia's gaze landed on Jane's study table. It was a mess, papers strewn about, books knocked to the ground. As she slowly regained her composure, she noticed a sinister note scrawled on the wall and read, "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights?" The realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. The murderer had been in the room last night when she returned. Amelia's blood ran cold as she realized that she had unwittingly been in the presence of a cold-blooded killer, just inches away from her sleeping body. Amelia's scream echoed through the dormitory halls, drawing the attention of fellow students who rushed to the scene. And as the police began their investigation, interviewing Amelia and scrutinizing the gruesome crime scene, I, the one telling this story, could only smile in the shadows. It was a smile of satisfaction, a chilling realization that my carefully crafted plan had succeeded. For I, the person recounting this tale, was the very killer who had left that haunting message on the wall, and the darkness of that dorm room concealed my wicked secret, hidden in plain sight.
It was a stormy, moonless night when Sarah found herself alone at home for the first time. Her parents had gone out of town, and only her loyal dog, Max, kept her company. The local news had been buzzing with stories about a serial killer on the loose, sending shivers down her spine. With a sense of foreboding, she locked all the doors and windows except for one stubborn window in her bedroom that refused to close. Thunder rumbled ominously in the distance as she finally lay down to sleep. Hours passed, the only sound in the house being the relentless patter of rain against the windows. Then, a faint, rhythmic dripping sound reached Sarah's ears. She turned on the bedside lamp, her heart pounding in her chest. The eerie noise continued, slowly driving her to the edge of fear. She reached out for Max, her faithful companion, expecting the reassuring warmth of his presence and a comforting lick on her hand. But he wasn't there. Max had always been there when she needed him, but not tonight. The dripping sound persisted, growing louder like a macabre symphony of terror. Desperation gnawed at Sarah as she finally summoned the courage to investigate the source of the sound. She padded through the dimly lit hallway to check the taps in the kitchen, the bathroom, and every other possible source, but they were all tightly shut, the water silently contained within. She returned to her room, the dripping sound echoing in her ears like a relentless drumbeat. With a trembling hand, she reached under her bed, fingers outstretched, yearning for the comfort that Max's presence brought. To her immense relief, her fingers met with a warm, wet tongue, and she felt the familiar sensation of her dog's affectionate lick. She left her hand hanging there, letting Max's presence calm her racing heart. But the dripping sound continued, incessant and unnerving. It seemed to be coming from beneath the bed, and her anxiety grew with each passing second. Sarah's eyes grew heavy, and despite her fear, exhaustion took hold. Slowly, she drifted into a fitful slumber with Max's occasional licks as her only solace. Morning light broke, dispersing the lingering darkness in the room. Sarah awoke, her head still foggy from the night's unsettling events. As she looked around her room, she noticed a strange, metallic scent in the air. The dripping sound had stopped, but what she saw next left her breathless. With trembling hands, she opened her closet door. Inside, hanging upside down, was Max, lifeless and covered in blood. The dripping sound she had heard all night had been the sickening drip of Max's blood onto the hardwood floor. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she approached the closet, her mind reeling in disbelief. It was then that she noticed a chilling message scrawled in crimson across the closet doors. Humans can lick too. A wave of terror washed over her, and she realized that she had not been alone that night. There was something far more sinister lurking in her home. The serial killer the news had warned of turned out to be a real threat in the night. Her hand that had reached beneath the bed for comfort had been licked, not by Max, but by someone malevolent. Sarah's heart pounded, and she knew she was not safe in her own home. She fled, leaving the message behind, determined to escape the house of horrors that had once been her sanctuary, forever haunted by the chilling lick in the night.
In the dim, moonlit night, a soft breeze rustled through the trees, casting eerie shadows over the parked car on Lover's Lane. Inside, Sarah and Mark, a teenage couple deeply in love, were wrapped in an intimate embrace, their breaths mingling in the confined space. The soft purr of the car's engine blended with the sweet symphony of their whispered words and tender kisses. As the amorous moments unfolded, their world was suddenly shattered by the abrupt silence of the car's radio. The radio announcer's voice crackled with urgency, sending a shiver down their spines. Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt your evening programming to bring you a grave and alarming message. Just moments ago, a dangerous serial killer who had been confined to the nearby asylum has escaped. Authorities are urging all residents to remain vigilant and report any sightings of a strange-looking man with a hook in place of his left hand. Sarah clutched Mark's arm, her eyes wide with fear. Her voice trembled as she said, "We need to go, Mark. Now." But Mark, captivated by the allure of their romantic hideaway, hesitated. "Come on, it's probably just some media exaggeration," he said, attempting to reassure her. "We'll be fine here. Besides, we're in the middle of nowhere. What are the odds he's even close by?" Sarah's terror was unwavering. "Please, Mark, just start the car. We shouldn't take any chances. I don't want to end up like those poor victims on the news." Seeing the panic in her eyes, Mark reluctantly turned the key in the ignition and reversed the car. They began their journey back to the safety of Sarah's home, but the unease hung heavy in the air. The dark, winding road seemed to stretch on forever. The only sounds were the tires on the pavement and the pounding of their hearts. Mark's grip on the steering wheel grew tighter, and Sarah's eyes darted from side to side, scanning the shadows. When they finally arrived at Sarah's house, her fear began to dissipate. She quickly unbuckled her seatbelt, ready to escape the confines of the car. Mark reached over to give her a reassuring kiss, but as she opened the car door, it refused to budge. Panic crept back into her eyes as she pulled on the handle again and again. "What's wrong with the door?" she cried. Mark frantically reached over to help, but as he did, they both froze in horror. Hanging from the doorknob was a gruesome, blood-stained hook. It swayed menacingly in the night breeze, a grotesque symbol of terror. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, and her voice quivered as she whispered, "Mark, we have to get out of here, now." The couple's terror surged as they realized that the escaped serial killer was not just a story on the radio. He was dangerously close, lurking in the shadows, and they were his unwitting prey. With trembling hands, Mark turned the key in the ignition, and the car roared to life. As the car sped away, the terrified couple thought they had narrowly escaped the clutches of the madman. But their relief was short-lived. A sinister whisper filled the car, sending chills down their spines. "You can run, but you can't hide." They turned around, their eyes widening in sheer horror. There, in the back seat, a shadowy figure with wild eyes emerged from the darkness. The escaped serial killer was right there with them, grinning maniacally. In their frantic escape, they hadn't realized that he had been hiding, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. With a guttural scream, the nightmare continued as the car raced into the unknown.